Hi there, DPR the man, that's who I am. Well, I went to my usual trouble of putting up an audio preview to the show on my website, and your website, hopefully, heresdathing.com. And in that audio preview, I spoke of having been bored over the last several months. I've bored myself. And I dare say that I'm afraid that I may have bored the listeners and viewers as well. So it's time for a change. And the change has come about. And I'm going to explain the reason why, as I always do. Just want to make sure that all of you understand, though, that this show is looking for replies. This show is looking for people to comment and come back with their ideas. Because, as I've said many times in the past, my opinion is that damned important, and so is yours. You just have to put it out there. I'm willing to do it. Are you? That's the big question. Well, what is it that inspired this show? The epiphany. Going back to the roots of Here's the Thing from way back when, the way I basically intended it to be. The article was posted, actually sent to me, if you will, by Ellen up in Illinois. And on there was a comment from Aiden here in Ohio. And the article is titled Cosmic Tribalism, Internet Ego, and the Future of Humanity by Connor Wood on pathos.com, Science on Religion. Interesting mix. One is very pertinent, especially with all the talk about the end times. And we won't get into the theological aspects or the metaphysical aspects, but it just happens to be appropriate for the time. I posted the entire article on the heresdathing.com Facebook page, so if you want to check that out, please do so. But not right now. Not right now. I want to talk about it first. And if you want to read it and come back with anything that comes to mind, then please do so. Later on, for those who aren't watching, I'll tell you how you can get involved. So let's go through the article here. Alrighty. About 4 years ago, I did a show. I don't have the exact date on it, but about 4 years ago, I did an entire show on how connected we all seem to have to be. How everyone is obsessed with having an iPhone or a smartphone of some type, or a netbook, or a notebook, or a laptop, or and so forth. And information is flying about at a blinding pace, overwhelming amounts of information, the age of too much information. And I didn't realize how right I was. I mean, it's gotten to the point now where even the government is paranoid about the fact that that much information can get out that quickly. And they should be, because they basically can't look sideways without being caught by someone, somehow. Look what happened to Mitt Romney in the campaign in 2012. He makes an off-the-cuff comment, it gets recorded, and he loses the election. And it seems like this particular author, Mr. Cook, has a slightly different take on what I said 4 years ago. Now, my specialty is communications, so this is right up my alley, and I really enjoyed it. And I can't thank Ellen enough for having brought it to my attention. And I sincerely hope she's listening or watching, because I want her to know that her opinion is that damned important. Okay, and I've concluded, obviously, that reading the entire article isn't necessary. So I decided to pick and choose what I liked and what I questioned. So let's start with what I like. Mr. Cook says that in order to fix our problems, we need to stop turning our ideological opponents into mortal enemies. Now, I've alluded to that many times, how we're being called names, and that's the only way to put us in our place. We don't attack the issues, we attack the people who have the issues. We attack the person who's not on our side. He's talking to Salon.com, Slate, Fox News, and conservative talk radio hosts, all of whom have their specific opinions, and all of whom, but use those opinions as being the truth, and everybody else is a liar. That's where he has a problem, I believe. Yeah, we can include CNN, MSNBC. Nobody watches them, but we can include them. He's also talking to the, quote, holier-than-thou internet commenters, like yours truly, of all stripes, which would include yours truly. Getting redundant. Stop spreading the illusion that ideological disagreement is the same thing as cosmic moral warfare. Now, we've certainly seen that. That's a quote. I couldn't agree more. I'll be the first to admit that I have an ideology. I'll be the first to admit that at times I get quite adamant about that ideology. But if you listen carefully and consistently, you will find that I do give credence to some of the so-called left-wing views. My effort has always been to show that a true conservative believes that everyone has a right to their opinion, and that a beltway conservative is an ideologue. So at this point, I'll apologize for having been too ideological of late. Although I will tell you that I still have my ideology, and I still stick to my guns when it comes to the opinion of how I want to run my life and how I'd like to see my life improve. Okay, that's something we're all entitled to. Again, personal excellence. We're entitled to make ourselves better, know ourselves better. Let's put it that way. We're entitled to know ourselves better in order to benefit all who are around us. To move on, the second point that I enjoyed was that Mr. Wood points out that a particular poster in the New York Times blog, who calls him or herself Gemli, G-E-M-L-I, consistently rips the right a new one, saying that the right is against science, has no intelligence, has no empathy, and wants the entire society and civilization to implode. All this person is doing is showing that they're no better than the people they criticize. Mr. Wood goes on to comment, and I quote, "And don't even get me started about the implicit suggestion that science is on the side of good, historically opposed to religion and to conservatism." Wasn't it Albert Einstein who said that, God didn't play dice with the universe, and everybody got all upset, and all he was trying to say was there's a plan. And no matter whom or what you believe is at the top of that plan, something or someone had to make all this happen. It isn't a random event. So science and religion actually go hand in hand in many ways. However, Mr. Wood goes on to say that the implicit suggestion that science is on the side of good, historically opposed to religion and to conservatism, is probably the single most destructive and self-fulfilling myth of our era. Yours truly feels that science is on the side of whomever is paying for their work, especially when it comes to ideology. It's that simple. If you want science to back you up, pay them for it. And they make their living from grants, from the government, from special interest groups. Science has been turned into something that's just about as political as politics. It's not a matter of science saying that the Earth is warming, or science saying that the Earth isn't warming. It isn't a matter of science saying that a certain chemical or substance is harmful or not harmful. It's a matter of who's paying them to say it. Okay. Third of all, I enjoyed this comment by the author. This is a quote. "So a message to everybody. If you're convinced that your particular group is monolithically correct all the time, you are wrong." He goes on to say that he's not calling anyone stupid, but he points out that some things that people deeply believe may be false. He doesn't purport to know what's false, but he appears to be willing to admit that either side could be wrong about something. One of the first things we learned in taking tests in school is that if the word never or always appears in a true or false question, the question is most likely false. It's a simple principle, but we all have to remember it. No one can say that something is always true. Think about that statement. That means that anyone can say that something is always true. And what I'm getting at right there is that if we use deductive logic, which is basically the limits of man's abilities, we have to know that there's a point where you cannot logically prove or disprove your point. What about the concept of God? You can logically prove there's a God, and you can logically prove that there isn't. You can logically prove that 0.000000001 equals 0. But yet, it's not true. You can logically prove that one infinity is bigger than another. But yet, infinity is still infinity. So obviously, there are points where mankind reaches a thinking level and then stops. And what these ideologues are doing is trying to convince us that we're not capable of thinking at their level. That we're not capable of fending for ourselves mentally. We need someone to tell us. We need someone who's wiser, more educated, more worldly, more in the loop, whatever you want to call it, than we are. And that's not true. That's not true at all. One of the things that's made this country great, one of the things that made many empires great in the past, during their time of being great, was the ability of their people to understand the goals, the common goals of their societies. The common goal of the American society has always been to promote freedom of expression, freedom of opportunity, equality under the law, and a form of government which, up until recently, has been unique. In the sense that, yes, the people in the government have the power, but they have to answer to other governments, if you will, the states, and the people. And what's happening here is that both sides of the ideological fence are attempting to garner all of the power for themselves. So basically what's happening is we're being told we're not bright enough to figure it out. We're not smart enough to know how to spend our money, how to earn our money, how to live our lives, how to use our resources. Why? Because of greed. Because of an all-consuming desire for power and wealth. And in that process, those who accumulate the power and the wealth never have enough. And those of us who don't have it are consistently watching it being taken away from us. And that goes for all the people in Washington right now. They put on the suit of a leftist or a rightist or a conservative or a liberal or whatever they want to call themselves, but in fact, they're politicians. They have power, they have wealth, and they're using it. Actually, the people who have the wealth are the ones who are doling out the power to the people who act on their behalf, if you will. It's always a matter of follow the money. Always a matter of follow the money. So as you can see, even though this article is on a left-wing website, to this point, Mr. Wood makes perfect sense. Well, now it behooves me and is incumbent upon me to let you know what I found to be, say, questionable, objectionable maybe, about Mr. Wood's article. We have to be fair. That's what it's all about. And so, issue number 1, question number 1. Once again, I'll quote Mr. Wood. Now, regardless of what you think about the politicians listed above, those having been Rick Santorum, Mike Huckabee, Ted Cruz, Rick Perry, and Bobby Jindal, and I personally am not much of a fan, they are not murderers, they are not psychopaths, and they might be wrong, dead wrong, even about what they believe. But the last time I checked, being wrong is not the same as being evil. That part I agree with. The problem I have here is that Mr. Wood is still denigrating right-wing politicians, which is what I thought he was trying to avoid. How can they be wrong about what they believe? They believe what they believe. From all appearances, this article is about the fact that people believe what they believe. So is it okay to say that either side of this cosmic warfare doesn't know what they believe? It's like saying we'll agree to disagree, but you're wrong. You know, once again, we run into the conundrum of deductive logic. Everyone could believe everything, or no one could believe anything, or no one could believe everything, or everyone could believe part of things. You can fool all the people all the time, and some of the people some of the time, and all the people some of the time, and all that. Basically, what that addresses, to avoid rambling, is that we reach a point where we have so much information that we may not know what to believe. Now, on that level, okay, keeping us confused is to the advantage of those who have power. Misinformation is the biggest weapon when it comes to controlling the population. Let's look at the UFO controversy briefly. Not that I'm going to go deeply into it, but what is purported to be happening by those who believe in extraterrestrial visits, abductions, UFOs? They purport that the government knows about it and covers it up with so much misinformation that we'll never get to the truth. They may be right. But what, they also have to realize, and I'm sure they do, that the government can do that with anything. They can do that with the economy. Right now, one of the big trends is that on July 1st, Barack Obama is going to sign House Bill 2847. And that's going to destroy the value of the dollar. And the U.S. economy is going to collapse again, worse than it ever has. And we all have to hurry up and invest in gold and invest in Mr. X's stock plan and Mr. Y's equity plans and what have you in order to save ourselves. Well, what Mr. X and Mr. Y aren't telling us is that we'd have to use paper dollars, which presumably we're not going to have, or they're going to be worthless. It's always a conundrum. It's a matter of fear. It's a matter of apprehension. If you feed too much information to a person, they're going to become anxious because you cannot process that much information at one time. The human brain is an amazing instrument. They're working on developing machines that'll do what the brain does, and maybe they're getting closer than we'd like, but be that as it may, at this point they haven't been able to do it. And there's a reason for that. But we won't go into the metaphysical and theological aspects of it. The point I'm trying to make here is this, okay? Marshall McLuhan, go back to Marshall McLuhan, back to the 70s, when everybody laughed at him, and see if he wasn't right. If it occurs in the media, or in this case on the internet, it must be true. But everything can't be true. Then anything can be. Everything can't be false. that anything can be. So I have a problem with him, his little veiled attack on the right there, when his whole article is presumably about not doing that. Question number 2. Why would Mr. Wood, when referring to conservative radio talk show demagogues, use the words, and I quote, "whom I respect so little I won't even bother to name," end quote, when he's writing an article which presumably about respecting everyone's point of view? He proceeds to point out that he doesn't. Well, maybe I can answer that. I didn't do it yesterday, but maybe I can now. Maybe because he's human. Again, one should not say that a person doesn't know what they believe. That's ridiculous. Of course they do. They may not know what to believe, but they certainly know what they believe. Question number 3. In the last paragraph of the article, Mr. Wood cautions people who are posting on Facebook or on a blog site that any sweeping generalizations about conservatives or religious believers that paints Middle America as an enemy, that you're making the Koch brothers very happy. At that point, I had to ask myself, what the hell do the Koch brothers have to do with it? He goes on to say that the last thing on earth they want to see is religious traditionalists and urban cosmopolitans finding common ground. And although he likes to be humble and admit that he could be wrong, that's the truth. In his eyes. In his eyes. Okay, the truth is the truth as we perceive it. Perception is 100% of the truth. That doesn't say that we're always right, as Mr. Wood so astutely points out. But, again, the truth is a matter of framework, context, syntax, the communications we receive, and where we choose to receive them from. Ending the sentence with a proposition. And where from we choose to receive them? Okay. That brings me around to a final point. He's telling his leftist friends that they need the religious and conservative ideologues on their side. And I have to ask myself, to accomplish what? Why can't the leftists be on the side of the conservatives and religious? Okay, so why do there have to be sides? If what Mr. Wood is purporting here is true, then there are no sides. There may be an us and them, so to speak, and we'll get into that momentarily, but there are no sides. But he says that the left needs the right on their side because nothing's been accomplished during the time that the two have been at war with one another. That's true. Everything's at a stalemate. Everything's at a standstill. Or so it appears. So we're being told. The agenda that's moving forward is the agenda of a secretly united left and right in Washington. Secretly united by what? What common ground? Power and wealth. Centering power in one place amongst one group of people. Elitists, if you will. That's where the us and them comes in. You've got us, we who are used to growing up under constitutional law, having at least some understanding of the right and wrong of society and the right and wrong of how to run a government and an economy and our lives. And then you've got them. They who would distort that law, distort that Constitution, and distort the principles of a federated republic to their own ends by frightening us into slowly giving up all of our rights, slowly giving up our free will to them. After all, they have free will too, but theirs is better than ours. Their infinity is bigger than our infinity. The number of elements in their set exceeds the number of elements in our set. So they're more important. They're inclusive of us and exclusive. See how deductive logic works and then stops working? And how people distort it enough they can appear to be logically proving anything? He says that without the consent of religious and the right, there will be no big new projects to tackle climate change. You can't tackle climate change or renewable energy. Now, I'm in full agreement that renewable energy is a good thing, but I believe that the way it's being accomplished is only there for the purpose of gouging the public for whatever method is accomplished, for the use of whatever method is accomplished, I'm sorry. Remember this, and remember, if you remember nothing else, remember this. Nothing happens unless someone's making money. Even a depression, even a recession, even a collapse of the economy, someone will become wealthy from it. He goes on to say, finally, let's not forget who benefits from the increasingly polarized cultural environment we've set up for ourselves. It's the wealthy and the powerful. Again, the Koch brothers, let's put it this way. If the Koch brothers' name is out of the public, then they're not the ones you have to worry about. The ones you have to worry about are the ones you don't know about. The ones whose names never come up. The ones who don't come up on the media, in the spotlight, on camera, in interviews. They don't have to. Somehow we know they're there, but they don't want us to know what they're up to or why, and they don't have to let us know. It's a need-to-know basis, and we don't need to know. I've said many times that the politicians are all about dividing us. That's their mission. As a unit, the citizens of the United States of America are a force to be reckoned with. That's been proven. As long as the politicians inside the Beltway are capable of reminding us of our differences, be they ideological, racial, religious, or economic, they will be able to pick apart any effort by the people to do things that benefit the people as a whole. A true conservative knows, to quote Abraham Lincoln, that a government of the people, by the people, and for the people shall not perish from this earth. So in conclusion, I can say that this article was good enough for me to warrant virtually an entire show, because it brings up points that I've been talking about for the last 4 years. I'm going to admit that I've strayed from some of the principles that I stuck with early on, but I'm going to make a concerted effort to go back to those principles. Instead of trying to tell you what to think, I'm going back to trying to tell you why you're thinking it. Okay? So, we move on. Had to take a quick break there simply because we're moving on to a different point, and that point is this, an amusing sidebar, if you will, something that occurred to me as I was doing this. In the past, I've talked about the Illuminatus trilogy, 3 books that were written back in the early 70s, late 60s perhaps. It was a spoof on conspiracy theory, and a very amusing and very educational spoof. The basic premise of the trilogy was that there's a group of people in the world who want to bring about Armageddon, but they want to do it under controlled circumstances so they can profit from it and end up being the ones who are in power. You know, we've seen that in the X-Files, where there's supposedly groups of people, or a group of people, who would want to be in charge of the Earth when the aliens come. So that theory's been out there for quite a while. Okay, when you think about it, all the stories you hear about the Trilateral Commission, the Bilderberger Group, or the New World Order, you have to realize that there very well could be a group of super wealthy, hence super powerful individuals who would profit from the chaos that they create. If that be the case, these individuals can ill afford to have millions and millions of people aware of what they're doing. History has shown that when millions and millions of people are aware of a wrong, they have a tendency to want to correct it. the present generation of wealthy and powerful people are not the politicians. The present generation of wealthy and powerful people are aware of the fact that they can't take on the entire population of the world. They've learned to divide and conquer. They've learned to play both ends against the middle. In this so-called cosmic warfare, their belief is that they will profit no matter which side wins, in quotes. As long as they can push the belief that someone's winning, we all lose. So there's my view, real quick, on that whole idea. Now, really quickly here, I want to say this again. I'm hoping that Ellen and Aidan are listening or watching. I hope that they pass this along, because this is one area where I really like to see some comments. A while back, I proposed to Ellen that she be a contributing editor to a segment that I would call Leaning Left, wherein I would acknowledge the fact that both sides have some good ideas. She has yet to respond to my proposal, but her attention to articles like this points out why I made the proposal in the first place, so I thank her for her contribution. By the way, Aidan is the son of the late James McCormick, who is acknowledged both on my website in the history section and in the credits on the video version of the show. Aidan, carry on the legacy. Okay? Last comments regarding this. I just want to leave you with this thought. Science does not want to do what God does, or did. They want to know how he did what he did. And I would be remiss at this point if I did not do my usual weekly foray into the Constitution of the United States of America. We're into the amendments now. Oh, before I do that, though, I just want to mention something. Coincidentally enough, Andrew is into a project at school right now, which he's going to turn in a couple of weeks, regarding one Francis Scott Key, who wrote the bumper music for this particular segment. Okay, the 17th, 18th, and 19th Amendments. 17th Amendment establishes a direct election of United States senators by popular vote. Up until then, they had been elected by the legislators or the electors in the states because for some reason the forefathers thought that the people weren't smart enough to do it. Well, they changed their minds. This was passed on April 18th, 1913. Okay, so it took a while, but they finally figured out that we should be able to elect our senators. The 18th Amendment, January 16, 1919, the infamous prohibition of alcohol. That turned out to be a mistake. Yes, sirree, Bob. Okay, how many programs have you watched about the people who were generated, the characters, I should say, who were generated by that particular amendment? And the 19th Amendment, August 18, 1920, establishes women's suffrage. That's one thing that women can say, is that they were denied the right to vote until 1920. A wrong that definitely need to be righted, if you will. My grandmother went to college back in the early 1900s, graduated, I believe, around 1912. And at that time, a woman had to go to college to be a stenographer, to learn shorthand and how to type in college. Okay? How things have changed. The problem was back then, women were only allowed to go so far, and they didn't have a voice in the government. So they had a difficult time getting the laws changed to where they are now. Again, the forefathers had a problem. They were in a culture at the time which believed that women were lesser humans, that slaves were lesser humans, that Native Americans were lesser humans. And in our context, that's evil. But you have to understand something. In their context, it was perfectly normal. There was nothing wrong with it. As time went on and societal thinking evolved and realities were realized. Things had to change. And that's what makes the Constitution the great document that it has been and is, and hopefully will continue to be. Because it allowed for those changes to be made, however long they took. It can allow for more changes to be made, however long they may take. But, because of it, the form of government we have, the empire, if you will, of the United States of America, has lasted longer and more prosperously than any of its predecessors. And we need to be aware of the fact that there are people right now, not leftists or rightists, but powerful people using politicians as their mouthpieces, if you will, their instruments, to destroy the rights that have made this country great. To bring us down to the level of the rest of the world's problems so that they may be able to control all of them at once, come across as the saviors, if you will, purport themselves as the second coming, if you want to look at it that way. So, again, read the Constitution. It's not a hard read. It's not a long read. And you don't need to be a lawyer to understand it. You simply need to know why it's there and remember to protect that which you hold dear. Well, the time has come to wind down. Near the end of this episode of Here's the Thing. DPR the man, that's who I am. And my opinion, like yours, is that damned important. You can contact the show at the email address hdt2010@roadrunner.com. You can view the show on YouTube and Google+. You can listen to the show at www.heresdathing.com, and we also have a Facebook page called heresdathing.com. So, my desire is for your feedback. You need to tell me what you're thinking, and I'll tell you why you're thinking it. As I said before, my opinion is that damned important. So is yours. The biggest difference is mine's out there. Are you willing to put yours out there with it? Upon reaching the end of this edition of Here's the Thing, WELBDBJ Radio and its Topic Key Productions has proudly brought you this edition for May 7th of 2014. DPR the man, that's who I am, and in my own inimitable way, I will wish you a good day, a good week, a good life. Come back next week and see me on Here's the Thing.